introduce to you the man of the hour,
Tony.
Hello and welcome to At the Gates. I am Tony, your host, coming from Utah Street with...
Still Jared.
Still Jared, so SJ instead of JJ from yesterday. We are, like I said, Utah Street, which is outside of Oriole Park at Camden Yards. So made the trip this morning from Philly to Baltimore. And how much did you enjoy Delaware?
Yep.
Yeah, like Wayne's World said best, oh look, we're in Delaware. That pretty much sums it up, especially because if you blink for too long, if you take a 15-minute nap, you're going to miss an entire state. Although it's not like it's a bad thing. It wasn't like a terrible state. It's just, it's there. It's like the forgotten child.
Yep. Like we talked about in the car, as a kid, you almost think like every state has its delineation mark where you can tell the difference between that state and this state, and obviously that's not the case. And so when you go from Philadelphia, passing through Delaware into Maryland, it all looks the same. The only way you would know is just by the sign. Hello, welcome to Delaware. So.
Are you saying that the map makers are lying and that there's not a dotted line that separates every state?
Well, if there is a dotted line, I missed it.
I missed it too. Well, actually, I think I see dotted lines,
Maybe.
but those look a little bit different. I think those are on every road.
Maybe where we crossed was in not the dash, but in the open space between the dashes.
That's probably true. They probably don't want people on the road to run into those big walls, because I'm pretty sure that the dotted line is probably like a wall.
Yeah.
Which, let's back up. Let's talk about the last 24 hours. Did we talk any about Citizens Bank Park? I don't think I actually did.
A little bit beforehand.
We did, but I don't think I did a
outside.
recap. So I'll recap really quickly. I forgot to do so in the last podcast, so I kind of left everyone hanging. So that was probably just a good intro into this podcast. So thanks for listening to both. They're probably going to be released at the same time. Anywho, got 6 last night somehow, which for no BP was really good. The means weren't the best. They were pretty much me trying to scrounge up whatever could work, and the big glove really helped. And then I'll let Jared give his opinion of the field itself, because I'll go a little bit more in depth when we get to Cleveland, but I'll let him share his view on where it ranks in his list.
Oh, that's a good question. So where it ranks in my list, I'll say that at the end. But, we talked about the exterior in the last podcast when we were waiting for the game to start. Once we got inside, I did, 2 or 3 individual laps of the ballpark, something like that. Took a bunch of pictures, and the inside's really interesting. It's a unique configuration on the inside where it's almost like a square, and then you chopped off the corners on every corner, so it's got this, like you said, stop sign-ish sort of shape, and that lends to all sorts of unique things for a baseball configuration, such as we were talking last night about how just circulation in general seemed to flow really well. Now, obviously, there wasn't a full house there, but it didn't seem like there was any major choke points like what we see at Target Field, which now has numerous ones as they keep adding stupid things to it.
And those even happen with the lower attendance that we've been having. So it's to compare that, I think you're right. It's probably different when it's higher attendance at Citizens Bank, but we're having the same issues, and that's half basically the regular or full house population.
Yeah, and I think they have it almost did it seem to you like the concourse was like exactly the same width all the way around the main concourse?
Yes. Yep.
So obviously that helps, whereas Target Field it doesn't do that in certain sections, right? And then I think having that more it's not circular, obviously, but that more rounded off kind of aspect to it, whereas Target Field has more of the slimline or streamlined baseball shape to it. The baseball shape lends itself more to choke points, whereas having it more rounded like that and an equal width concourse all the way around lends to some good circulation.
And like we said last night, it didn't seem like they had those offshoots like Target Field does, where you have those back alleys which still have places to eat or nooks and crannies that you can go down.
Yeah.
They pretty much kept it on the perimeter of the back wall.
Yeah, and they have what I think to be equal number of food carts in the concourse. However, at Target Field, it seems like, like we talked about, those weird choke points, especially where the concourse gets narrower. The Twins keep trying to cram more stuff into those corners, which makes the choke points even worse. Hopefully they realize that going forward and take a hint from ballparks like in Philadelphia. But there was something else. Oh, circulation wise, they have a ton of means of circulation for getting up and down. So they have your standard ramps, they have a ton of stairwells and elevators and escalators. And as I said last night when Tony and I were talking, it seems like it's a lot, but when you go back to Target Field, obviously that's what we compare it to. When you go to Target Field, you see that, or you don't see those things, and that, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that everything at Citizens Bank is exposed, whereas at Target Field it's all closed in, walled off to the elements and all that kind of stuff. The elevators are behind little doorways in the back, around corners and things like that, so you don't necessarily see them and recognize them, which then in turn puts more people into the concourse and up the escalators, because those are the only ones they can physically see. Again, that's a problem for Target Field. Citizens Bank Ballpark doesn't. It's all exposed, so you can physically see where you get up and where you get down, and makes it super easy to get around. They have a lot of unique views from the ballpark. I've got some really great pictures that I'll send to Tony and he can share on the blog. Some really interesting seating sections. The cheap seats and the bleachers out in right field. They're not, obviously they're cheap seats, right? But you do, for a sold out, at least you're getting in the door. You got a seat. Not the greatest spot to sit, but it's kind of a cool view. You're sort of, it's almost like you're.
And you're talking about the one underneath the Liberty Bell, correct?
Yes, correct. It's a unique view. It's almost like this, what I would compare to the seats at Wrigley that are on the buildings across the street, because it's almost like you're looking into the stadium from outside, even though you technically are in the stadium. So that's a really unique view. I walked through most of the sections in the upper and lower levels. It definitely feels like the upper levels are closer to the field than some of the other ballparks we've been to. It may not actually be the case, but it definitely feels that way. And there's only a few bad places that I would consider bad seats. One of the big ones would be the upper levels in the right field corner, basically going from the foul pole into the outfield and just around the corner into foul territory. They obscure a lot of right field, all the way from right field to center field, well out into not just the warning track, but well out into the field. And they're high enough and far enough away where you think it wouldn't be a problem, but it actually is. So you're missing a lot of the game for those long fly balls. Obviously not a lot of the balls go out there, but still. But other than that, the inside, it's got a really great feel to it. As far as I'm concerned, they have a lot of great concessions. They push everybody to the outside. All the stands are on the inside of the concourse. The cart stands. What else did we cover last night as far as the interior of the ballpark? I thought it was lit really well.
The smell?
The smell on the outside that we mentioned before. I didn't really notice it during the game, so it must have just been a one-off kind of deal. We did notice that in some of the wide-angle shots that I was getting that from right field, that there was a lot of factory smoke behind the building on the other side, way off in the distance.
New Jersey.
Yeah, is that what it was? I wasn't paying attention to the orientation of the ballpark, but not that that's a downside, but it's just different. You don't see that. Obviously, it's a downside for the environment if they're not cleaning it up and all that kind of stuff. But
And we both said that it kind of looked like there was tornadoes
It did
on the
look like
horizon,
tornadoes,
especially because they weren't really storms that went through, but the rain. So to see basically pillars of clouds that are touching the ground and narrow ways, it was like, oh, there's 3 tornadoes that are touching the ground just outside of there.
hopefully my photos can convey that, because not make it look like tornadoes, but just sort of give an idea of that's
Yeah.
what we were seeing, because that was kind of funny. I got a good laugh out of that when I was taking the pictures, and then we laughed about it more as we talked about it after the game.
How about the sounds? You mentioned that as well, because you said Target Field has that kind of ongoing hum of the traffic.
Oh yeah. So at Target Field, we have the beginning of 394 goes under Target Field, the plaza out in right field, and there's a constant hum of cars that goes by, and it amplifies that drone sound, white noise kind of stuff. At Citizens Bank Ballpark, you don't really have that, which makes it nice, although when it gets quiet, it gets quiet.
Yeah.
So
And part of that is probably due to the fact that it's not a field that's in the city. It's not downtown. It's just outside. We talked about already on the other show that it's part of a more large sports complex area, but it would really be interesting to see if another game is going on, if you can hear, especially the Phillies or the Eagles, if their game gets kind of loud and crazy, if you can actually hear that from Citizens Bank.
we talked about how we don't know if they have multiple games at one time, but how with our Lyft driver afterwards, we talked about how kind of crazy that would be to be able to go if they did have all 3 complexes or facilities going at one time for an event, how crazy it would be to go from one to the next if they all timed out the right way. That would be like extremely insane, but like super cool of a sports town kind of experience. Or like you said, if it's like a playoff atmosphere and you're at one game and you can hear the other game just roar, like, heck yeah, your team is doing good, even from a whole nother facility. We talked about how the downside of having a sports complex like that outside of downtown is that it's not in downtown and it's a ways away. But the upside of that is parking is usually not an issue. It's pretty easy to do. There's a lot of plus and minuses to it. I sort of prefer the downtown feel, even though there's a whole lot of ease of use kind of thing out in the suburbs. What else did we talk about? Think of anything else? We talked about a lot of things. So.
Yeah. I don't know. So what would you compare it to with Target Field?
Oh yeah, I said that it seemed to have aged a lot better than Target Field seems to be doing right now.
And part of that just could be the elements as well, because Target Field is exposed
A little bit
more
harsher elements on a regular basis. At the end of the day, I told Tony that, if I remember right, that I would put Target Field and Citizens Bank Ballpark almost equal. They have some really good pluses and really bad minuses that sort of equal each other out. They're not the same kind of pros and cons, but they would be relatively on the same level. Citizens Bank Ballpark having a slight edge over Target Field.
Yeah, you basically said if Target Field is a number, let's just say if it's a number 8 out of 30, Citizens Bank would be just number 7, and it would be a close 7-8. It wouldn't be, comparing Target Field to the former home which was Metrodome. So it's not like there's a huge gap. I think that I was about the same. I think I've rated it maybe a little bit lower actually than Target Field. I can't remember where I put it, but it's in that group. I realized when I said it yesterday that there was 12 ballparks that I would want to go back to and then 4 that I don't really care for. Well, when I looked at it, it seems like the top 5 or 6 on my list are ones that I really love, and then kind of that middle part is ones that I would go back to, but they're good but not great. And I think Target Field and even Citizens Bank kind of fall in that area where they're not the crown jewels, but they are definitely ballparks that deserve to still be standing, and hopefully it can age gracefully.
And they take care of them too.
Yep.
Don't just let it go to shit because you want a new stadium in 15 years.
Yep.
So how was it for you as a ball hawk?
It's really tough to say. Having no BP was absolutely terrible, but the fact that I could still squeeze out balls from basically nothing, yes, I said squeeze out balls, it made it pleasurable, if not, God, I swear this is not like innuendo time.
Pleasure.
It was both a lot of pleasure at the end of the day because I got 6, but super nerve-wracking because I had to wait for a while to get the first one, wait even longer to get the second one, and then they kind of started to come in during the game slowly, and once I had the third one, I felt good. When I had the fourth one, I felt great because then basically all the streaks I care about were still extended. The getting one that's a gamer and getting 4 or more, and then the rest was just kind of gravy. I would like to go back to see. It seems like it could be a really good ballpark to put up big numbers, but I just didn't have that opportunity. I'm looking forward to this ballpark though, because from what we saw, not only was the tarp off, but the cage was being moved into place. And so last night we, after the game, talked a little bit about the ballpark, fell asleep, woke up, and
Fell asleep in each other's arms.
we spooned. Maybe did more than that. No, I don't think so.
No.
Although maybe if you read the news about Washington, D.C., maybe we both took that drink from one of the bars in D.C. called Pill Cosby. Yeah, look that up. That's a story in and of itself. It sounds like it's awkward. But we woke up, got up. We forgot to take a picture at Citizens Bank Park last night for the Polaroid, so we reenacted that and went on our way. About 2 hours on the road, came down here, and right away got something to eat. I think I'm covering that. There's not a lot of details today, really. Got something to eat, and then after that went down to the ballpark, parked, and then took the tour. I won't get too in-depth because I think I'm going to save most of the review for tomorrow at the gates. But maybe in a minute or two, what did you think of the tour and the experience so far of Oriole Park?
Well, to put it simply, there's no doubt in my mind that this ballpark is the top of my list. Then again, I also haven't been to the AT&Ts kind of thing, so AT&T might fight it, but this is number one right now.
Yep. Is it miles ahead of PNC so far, which before it seemed like was probably at the top?
We talked in one of the earlier podcasts about being a complete package as a ballpark. This ballpark is definitely a complete package, or as close as a complete package as you can get. PNC is pretty darn close too, but Camden Yards has definitely a leg up on PNC.
And it was built in 1992, so you can see, and I think we both realize this, that probably about 90% of the ballpark is absolutely stunning. Then there's about 10% that is showing its age, but it's
You have to be looking for it, kind of thing.
Plus, it's 25 years. I mean, steel doesn't last forever, and neither does paint. It didn't seem like anything was actually falling apart that was super necessary, and like a support beam that would cause chaos is going to collapse. But you can still tell in a few areas that some of that stuff is 25 years old. But
even the style holds up well.
Yeah. It's really cool because normally I don't like the claustrophobic feel, but it doesn't feel claustrophobic, it just feels big. Having that warehouse just makes it larger than life, and it's cool because the warehouse feels like part of the field, but it also feels like almost like it's its own city down here, and having the little museum right over here that we're by that kind of almost looks like Independence Hall is kind of cool too. So it's I think I didn't want to rate it yet, but I know that it's fighting with AT&T already on my list. After the game, I'll be able to rate it properly and take in a game and know exactly how everything works. But I think that basically leads us up to this point. So we did the tour. It was a positive experience. It wasn't the top tier tour that I've done, but it was well worth $9.
The guy definitely knew his stuff, took us through a lot of good places. Some places take you into the Champions Club kind of areas behind home plate. This one didn't take us there, which is fine. Some of them will take you into the clubhouse. Game days, obviously, you won't go into the clubhouse, especially as close to game time as we went.
But that field access, especially with you taking pictures, I think is pretty darn huge, and it felt really cool to just be in some of those areas that you wouldn't otherwise be. And like you said, the guy was knowledgeable. I think Fenway for me still is tops for the tours, just because it was over the top. You go in and you're like, I don't want to like the Red Sox, but then at the end you just get pumped up and you're like, yeah, this place is great. Yeah. The Red Sox are actually pretty cool. So it wasn't quite the crazy up tempo like that, but it I would say spend the $9, get there early, take a quick tour, especially if you do the 1 o'clock one. They don't close the gates until about 3, maybe a little bit after, so you can kind of wait around. Some of the Twins guys came out, mainly the coaches. Some of the outfielders were taking some drills, and then Chris Jimenez, one of the catchers, came out, went to the bullpen area, said he liked my glove, and actually, no, it was Neil Allen who said that he liked my glove, wasn't it?
Neil Allen started it, got your glove from you, and then threw it to Chris Jimenez,
and Jimenez, started. He was like, yeah, I wanna do a BP session with you. So he was throwing bullpen out there, which, if you know the Twins, he's had to come in once this year in a blowout and pitched an inning. So he was joking that he was working on his follow-up outing, and had that big old glove and did the intimidation stare with the glove over his face. So got some pretty good photos of him wearing that, and I think that basically means that I have a MLB used glove on my hands now.
It counts. I think it counts, yeah.
So I'll go over to the authenticator and ask for a sticker, and we'll show him the photographic proof. And yeah, it was just kind of cool to see some of that behind the scenes stuff. And like you said, it feels like its own city, especially because they keep the gates open until a little bit after 3, so you can come in even if you're not doing the tour and just go on work, take a break, come down. They have a nice eating area in left center that it's just open to the public. It's cool.
I don't think you even described it all that well. So remember that the ballpark is a building in and of itself, and then you have a street, Utah, and then you have the warehouse building, right? And the Utah street is they treat it just like any other street that you might see in a quaint little neighborhood with a nice little street worth of small mom and pop shops and things like that. That's the feel of it, and they leave that area open up until that time. Not only that, but when you get onto Utah Street and walk around center field towards left field, you're basically in the ballpark, even though they have the main gates, the entrances into the seating sections closed. You're basically standing over the pitchers, over the bullpen, not the pitcher. You're standing over the bullpen, and you can do that when the ballpark isn't even open for a game.
Yep.
So you're there in the ballpark essentially.
And that's where it might have a leg up too on like Fenway and Wrigley, because both of them have their areas that are like Wrigleyville, like Yawkey area. It's just you have those areas that kind of add to that city like feel to that stadium, but it's not actually part of the stadium. But this is actually part of the stadium. It's like a self-sustaining little village that is the stadium, and it's awesome. I think we'll leave it there. Listen to us talk about things on the next episode. And where will we be?
We'll be back in Washington, D.C.
Hi, Al Franken. I know you're listening. We enjoyed the breakfast with you, maybe. Bye.